Field days were used to help train the volunteers. One such field day in Dungannon was reported as follows. Field operations on an extensive scale were carried out yesterday in Dungannon Park, the use of which had been granted for the occasion by the Earl of Ranfurly. Although Easter Monday is one of the few for the artisans and labourers of the district, the men thought it their duty in this time of crisis to forgo their day's relaxation from toil, and carried out most successfully a series of arduous operations in very wet and cold weather. Although 1,600 officers and men were in action, and the movements were eagerly followed by a large number of spectators, the general idea of the operation was that the outpost of a Northern Army, one battalion, was covering a division near Castle Caulfield. Its orders were to hold in check a Southern Army advancing from Armagh until the division had time to prepare to give battle. On the other hand, the advance guard of a Southern Army, consisting of 2 battalions, had orders to drive in the outposts and, if possible, to bring the Northern Army into action before it had the time to get into position at Castle Caulfield. For the purposes of the operations, the main road from Armagh to Castle Caulfield was assumed to run through the park, crossing the Lake Bridge. The outpost was under the command of Colonel R.T.G. Lowry, D.L. Pomeroy House, and consisted of the Dungannon Bay, Castle Caulfield, Pomeroy and Derry-Gartrevy companies, was entrenched on Plunkett's Hill. The lines extended from the Lake Bridge to the Park Garden. The advance guard, which was in charge of Mr. Robert Stevenson Dungannon, second in command of the battalion, and consisted of Dungannon A, C, Bush, New Mills, Killyman, Moy and Bernburb companies, entered the park by the Magashall Gate and attacked from 3 points. The great majority of the men engaged on both sides carried sporting guns and were each served with 20 rounds of blank ammunition. It had been arranged that in the assault on Plunkett's Hill, 1 man per section would fall out as a casualty during each rush, and would be attended by the ambulance corps, a large detachment of whom were present, in charge of Dr. F.C. Mann Dungannon, County Medical Officer. Colonel J. Armstrong, late commanding the 5th Fusiliers, acted as umpire-in-chief and was assisted by Viscount Northland, officer commanding Dungannon Battalion, Major D. Alexander, adjutant, Captain Ricardo, DSO, Major E. Miles Gaskell. The operations were ably carried out, and each detachment was kept well informed by a capable staff of signallers and dispatch riders. Colonel Lowry, commanding the defenders, had posted out 4 pickets with supports in the rear and the reserve on Plunkett's Hill, and offered a stubborn defence. The attacking force, which in numbers doubled those of the defenders, advanced in good style, and having driven in the pickets, finally captured Plunkett's Hill and drove its defenders to the park boundary wall. At the close, the entire force paraded on the showgrounds when Colonel Armstrong addressed them. He said that the attack had been ably carried out and their commander had had good control over his men. All the operations had been carried out credibly, and the attack had actually been able to enfilade the defenders' left picket from Bullock Hill. The men had evidently been paying attention to the instruction given as to taking cover. Captain Ricardo, DSO, also spoke, and also had been tremendously struck with the improvement effected since he had witnessed their operation a month ago. He referred especially to the work done by the scouts and signallers, which had been extremely good. These men had evidently profited by instruction, as they extended in good order and there was no bunching. Cheers were given for His Majesty the King and for Lord Northland, after which the proceedings terminated. Although a voluntary army, it was professional in its outlook and how it issued its orders. Like in any army, success requires self-discipline. This can be seen in orders issued on the 13th of April 1914 by the Tyrone Regiment regarding mobilisation. As part of the orders, the Tyrone Regiment reminded its members, "We have no quarrel with our nationalist Catholic neighbours. Do not molest them or be offensive to them in any way. Do not take aggressive action against them. If the nationalists take aggressive action against us, restrain your men to the utmost, and at once report to company and battalion commanders. Send a quiet man to interview an influential nationalist and inform him that unless his people are restrained, we shall take immediate and organised steps to protect our people and property." With the assumption that the probability of the UVF having to fight the British Army nullified after the Curragh incident on the 20th to 21st of March 1914, orders from the Tyrone UVF clearly stated, The UVF do not fire the first shot, and no shot is to be fired until more than one volunteer of your section has been killed or wounded by shots. You must be absolutely certain of this, as a mistake on your part would be fatal. The incidents at the Curragh and Marlborough Barracks in Dublin over the weekend, 20th, 21st and 22nd of March 1914, were unprecedented in the British Army. Brigadier General H.D. Lepore Gough informed the Commander-in-Chief Sir Arthur Paget that he and all his officers would prefer to hand in their papers than take service against Ulster. This situation showed the strength of feeling of officers and men within the ranks. During those days in March 14, it had been widely suggested that the Liberal government were going to use the British Army to move against the UVF headquarters staff. Resulting from Brigadier General Gough's action and those of his officers and other officers and men in the ranks of other regiment, no such move took place. The Liberal government could said to have been bluffed, but had their bluff called. The importance of discipline was reinforced through orders such as the above. The UVF leadership wished to avoid outbursts of sectarian violence involving their ranks, and realised that if this happened, it could give rise to an opportunity for the government to move against them. With the Home Rule Bill passed for a third time in the House of Commons on the 25th of May 1914, and being defeated for the third time in the House of Lords, the government used the Parliament Act to override the Lords and send it for royal assent. Facing the Home Rule, James Craig issued the following statement on the 9th of July 1914. The administration of Ulster was to be taken over. In trust for the Constitution of the United Kingdom and upon the restoration of a direct imperial government, the provisional government shall cease to exist. The provisional government met for the first time on the 10th of July 1914. The UVF role was now to defend the provisional government if called upon. Ulster stood and waited, ready to defend itself against what it saw as unconstitutional activity of the time by the Liberal government, dependent on the Irish Parliamentary Party to remain in government. The Dungannon Battalion were still carrying out field operations during July 1914, and indeed on Friday the 20th July 1914 a field operation was carried out in Roxburgh Park, Moy, where a maximum gun was in action. On that same Friday, as the Dungannon Battalion trained in preparation of being mobilised, the Buckingham Palace Conference of the 21st to 24th July was convened. This showed how deeply concerned at a crisis that could have been ended in civil strife throughout the Irish countryside could have been. The official announcement that His Majesty has suggested a conference on the Home Rule question at Buckingham Palace and had invited representatives of the British and Irish parties was made yesterday in the House of Commons by the Prime Minister, who stated the King had acted in consequences of the grave situation that has arisen. Mr. Bonner-Law said he and those for whom he spoke had loyally accepted the command of His Majesty. Mr. Redmond disclaimed responsibility, but said that as an invitation came to Mr. Dillon and himself in the form of a command from the King, they accepted them. In the House of Lords, the Marquess of Crewe, applying to Lord Courtenay, said the government accepted responsibility for the invitations to the conference, which in no way affected the supreme authority of Parliament. Despite the conference, compromise proved elusive. Ulster was poised, but events in Europe began to outstrip even those in Ireland. On the 3rd of August 1914, the British Empire declared war on Germany. Home Rule was eventually put on the back burner and would be mothballed until the end of the war. Indeed, Carson declared, "England's difficulty is not Ulster's opportunity. However we are treated and however others act, let us act rightly. We do not seek to purchase terms by selling our patriotism." Carson himself went on during the First World War to serve as the Attorney General, First Lord of the Admiralty and member of the War Cabinet.